What if someone told you one single drop of blood could detect over 200 diseases? No needles, no lab, just one drop. And what if the woman who sold the world that dream was lying about every single part of it? Elizabeth Holmes enrolled at Stanford University at 18. But at 19, she made a decision that would either make her a legend or a criminal. She dropped out. She locked herself in a room and started designing something the medical world had never seen. A tiny device that could run hundreds of blood tests from just one finger prick. She called the company Theranos, a mix of therapy and diagnosis. The pitch was simple and beautiful. Prick your finger, one drop of blood, and within minutes, know if you have cancer, diabetes, or dozens of other diseases. Fast, cheap, painless. Revolutionary investors went crazy. Within a few years, Theranos was valued at $9 billion, and Elizabeth Holmes, a college dropout in her early 30s, became the youngest self-made female billionaire in American history. She was everywhere: Forbes, Fortune, Time magazine. The media couldn't get enough of her. She was the female Steve Jobs, the visionary who was going to save lives. She surrounded herself with powerful names, former government officials, generals, secretaries of state. Her board read like a who's who of American power. Nobody questioned her, nobody dared. Hundreds of millions of dollars poured in. Everyone was so dazzled by the vision that nobody stopped to ask the most obvious question: does the machine actually work? The device was called the Edison, and behind closed doors, it was a disaster. It could barely run a handful of the tests it promised. Employees knew, engineers knew, but nobody was allowed to say a word. So what did Theranos do? They secretly ran patient blood samples on regular commercial machines made by a company called Siemens. Machines anyone could buy. Then they passed the results off as if their own technology had produced them. Real patients were getting real results. Except the results were wrong. Some people were told they had HIV. They went home and told their families. They cried. They panicked. All because of a false positive from a machine that never worked. Others were told they were cancer-free when they weren't. They skipped treatment. They made decisions based on lies. These weren't just business mistakes. These were real people whose lives were being altered by fraud. And through all of it, Elizabeth sat in her glass office, calm, composed, giving speeches, raising more money, while the lab behind her walls was falling apart. Then cracks started to appear. A young employee named Tyler Schultz, grandson of one of her most powerful board members, started noticing that the test results simply did not add up. The numbers were wrong. Consistently wrong. He raised it internally. He was shut down. When he tried to go further, Theranos unleashed a team of lawyers on him. He was followed, threatened, pressured into silence. He quit and got out, but the story didn't die. A Wall Street Journal reporter named John Carreyrou had been quietly building a case for months, talking to former employees, connecting the dots. When Elizabeth found out, she called his editors. She sent lawyers. She did everything to kill the story. It didn't work. In October 2015, the Wall Street Journal published the story. The headline hit like a bomb. Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes were accused of massive deception. The company that was going to revolutionize medicine had been faking it the whole time. Everything collapsed almost overnight. The $9 billion valuation evaporated. Partnerships were cancelled. Walgreens pulled out. The FDA showed up. Then the SEC. Then criminal investigators. Federal agents raided the company. They found what employees had been hiding for years: a lab that couldn't do what it claimed, results that had been manipulated, and patients who had been put at real risk. At trial, Elizabeth's defense was essentially, "It wasn't me." She blamed her ex-boyfriend and former business partner Sunny Balwani. She blamed her employees. She said she genuinely believed in the technology. The jury sat and listened, then they made up their minds. January 2022, Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty on 4 counts of criminal fraud. The woman who had been on every magazine cover, who had shaken hands with presidents who had been called the next Steve Jobs, was a convicted felon. She was sentenced to over 11 years in federal prison. At sentencing, she cried. She expressed regret. But the damage was already done, to investors who lost hundreds of millions and to patients who had trusted a machine that never worked. Elizabeth Holmes built an empire on a story. And for a while, the story was enough. But in the end, the only test that mattered was reality, and reality doesn't lie. If this kind of story is what you're into, subscribe, because the next one is just as insane.